Have you ever thought about reincarnation? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV. This week my special guest is soul writer Joanne DiMaggio. We're going to talk about her new book, Thomas Jefferson Reborn. We've also got performer and artist Victoria Gordon. She's created a new series called Pilot Season. You can also catch me on KCAA and my worldwide podcast, Guys Radio. Thanks for your support. Return guest to Guys Radio. Her name is Joanne DiMaggio. She calls herself a reporter for the universe. She's a soul writer, a hypnotist, like myself, a past life regressionist. She's written 5 books: Soul Writing, Your Soul Remembers, Accessing Your Past Lives, Karma Can Be a Real Pain, and the latest book we're going to talk about today is called Edgar, Cayce, and the Unfulfilled Destiny of Thomas Jefferson Reborn. It's quite a mouthful, but it's a really interesting concept. So welcome back to Guys Radio. Joanne, so nice to see you again.
Oh, same here, Robert. Thanks for asking me back.
My pleasure. So past lives, they don't always ascend, do they? I mean, can you go, you're a past life regressionist, and I'm also a hypnotist. I've been in past life regressions. I've given them not as much, nearly as much as you, of course, but my understanding is that you can, a past life and a future life, if you will, when you incarnate, you could go back actually to an earlier time. You could go forward. Do you always ascend? Just give us kind of a broad stroke on what the whole meaning and significance is of past life and past life regressions and how it relates to current lives.
Well, they don't go chronologically in terms of, you've had a really great life before this one, and their next one is going to be even better, and the one after that even better. No, it doesn't work that way. You've chosen to work out whatever karmic issues you brought in with you in this life. So in my previous book, I talked about the afterlife planning session. So we do a regression. We find out which lifetime is most impacting you today, because you can't possibly work on all of them, right? So we find out which one's impacting you today. What are the issues from that life that you decided that this life was absolutely perfect to work on those issues? Then you bring them in and you work through those. So you might have a very lofty life, and you might even have one where there's just nothing but happiness and prosperity and peacefulness and love. And then the next life, you get hit with the whammy and, you're dealing with some pretty serious challenges. But that's because of the karmic choices that you made. So in the end, it's all the same. It all kind of adds to your soul's growth so that, you have the end result being the same. But how we get there for each of us is different.
Okay. Relative to this book about this young man who was considered to be Thomas Jefferson Reborn, and at least that's what the famed Edgar Cayce said about him when he came into this world, and then he kind of got off track. I guess the question is, if there's a divine plan for all of us, or in just a general divine will and divine plan, how much free will do we actually have?
We have an enormous amount of free will. In the case that I point out in the book, what Mr. Cayce saw in him when he was 2 days old, that's when he gave him that reading, was that he could do for the world what Jefferson did for this country. And that's pretty heavy to lay on a 2-day-old baby, right? But Cayce, when he was doing the reading, he said, provided this happens. In other words, provided he gets this kind of education, provided he's raised this way. So what happened is his parents made decisions for him because he was a child, because Cayce died when TJ was only 8.5. Those decisions put him on a totally different trajectory than what Cayce had foreseen for him. So that's where the free will comes in, and even for him later on as an adult, at any given time, he could have, gone back to that reading that Cayce gave and had that foundation, because Cayce taught him from the time he was very little about reincarnation and about the creation story and about karma and how to read auras. He had that foundation, but he just chose not to do anything about it. And so, his life did not turn out the way that it could have turned out had everything been followed the way Cayce had laid it out for him.
Is he still alive?
He is. He lives here in Charlottesville.
Oh, okay.
He's
How's he doing?
He's doing well. He's doing well. He lives a very private life. He's somewhat of a recluse. Lives alone up on this mountain. Doesn't have internet service, so he's back in the old days. But I talk to him quite often, and he's very grateful that this book came out because, in a way, I mean, I had written it to. I felt that he had been maligned, and I wanted the world to know what the true story was. That's me being my reporter for the universe. I saw a good story there.
How old was he? And his name is Thomas Jefferson Davis.
That's right.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
how old was he when he found out that Edgar Cayce had predicted this incredible future for him? Because it must have put an incredible amount of pressure on him.
Well, it was in that reading he got when he was 2 days old. So
Oh,
his aunt Gladys Davis, who was Casey's secretary all those years, and she was close part of the Cayce family. TJ said she used to read that life reading to him every night like a good night story, like a storybook. So he had that embedded in him from the time he could understand, so from day one. Now, Mr. Cayce said to him, he told the family, I'll give him a second reading when he's 13 years old, and that will clarify what his journey is going to be, what his role is going to be. Unfortunately, Mr. Cayce died before TJ reached the age of 13, and he never got that second reading. And he does say he regrets that greatly. He really felt that was going to help him along, and he just this didn't happen.
is it possible? I'm not trying to play word games. That T.J. Davis was destined not to transcend Thomas Jefferson and fulfill that.
Well, you know what, Robert? I believe we've misinterpreted that reading. I think that what Mr. Cayce was trying to say didn't have anything to do with Thomas Jefferson. I think what he was trying to say is that the knowledge that he was pouring into that little boy, when they would sit out on the pier from the time he was TJ was 2 years old, they would go out in the pier and they would fish together. And while they're out on the pier, that was his classroom. That's where Mr. Cayce taught him everything. He's pouring all this wisdom in this little boy, right? I think it was that he would change the world by sharing with other people what Cayce knew. Okay, so what was in the readings? Because TJ has said to me on numerous occasions, he said, Joanne, the answers for all the questions that humanity has are in those readings. If only people knew that and would take the time to go there and study them. So I think what he meant was that he could do for the world what Jefferson did for this country, meaning you can transcend, you could give people a tool that'll help change their lives, and in changing their lives, you'll change the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting now is this book is getting a lot of attention overseas. So I told TJ already, he's got a big following in Japan. I told him, I said, see, we're already going global with this. So maybe
That's awesome.
you're 84, but maybe you'll still fulfill that prophecy.
Now, for those of our listeners and viewers who are not familiar with Edgar Cayce, could you give us a little snapshot as to who he was and why he was such an important figure in the 20th century?
Okay. Edgar Cayce was considered the most renowned psychic of the 20th century. He was also considered the father of holistic medicine. In his lifetime, he gave 14,000 readings. So what would happen was people would either come in person or they'd send him a letter, they'd ask him a question, he would go into trance, then he would either go to their Akashic record to look up if it's information about them, or he would go to source and he would ask the question, get the answer, and bring it back down. And he did this, like I said, 14 of the 14,000 readings. You got to remember that 12,000 of those were health readings, people that came to him for chronic illness. He would give them the remedy. And then 2,000 of those were life readings, and that's where the past life information came through. We are still catching up to him as far as the health readings are concerned and the remedies. He was so far ahead of his time. He founded the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and he also founded Atlantic University, both of which are in Virginia Beach. So, I don't know exactly how many members they have at this point, but they're still going strong. And you could look up the readings if you're a member. They're online at yourcayce.org. And I don't think anybody, to be honest with you, since Cayce died, has been of his caliber. I don't think anybody has been at that level. So he was a real treasure to those who knew him and who had the fortune of having a reading from him.
I know a lot of his teaching because I read a book about him a long time ago when I was a teenager, actually, and then I read a second one, and it was about some of his specific health and diet tips, diet
Mhm.
and wellness. And I kept that book for a really long time. And I remember he said, if you're going to eat apples, make sure they're baked. And I guess my question is, were his health tips, if you will, and wellness tips individualized, or were they for people in general, or both?
I would say both. They were individualized for that person. Many times he would recommend glycothylamine to people. And TJ said that he has taken glycothylamine every single day since he was little and has never really gotten sick. He hasn't been ill in his entire life, really. I mean, he had some illnesses when he was a child that Mr. Cayce took care of. So for me now, I read this and I get the glycothylamine. I get it from the company that originally made it. It's been around over 100 years. And if I start to get a sore throat, I'll gargle with it. It's basically a mouthwash, but I'll gargle with it and it's instantly gone. It's just amazing. But he has remedies for almost every possible physical condition you could think of. Um, and people's to use the castor oil packs and some of the other remedies that he recommended, they're still doing those. I mean, you could buy the products that are based on the original recipes and use them for various problems that you have, physical problems. So, and they do them over at the A.R.E Health Spa in Virginia Beach. So, yes, they were specific, and yes, that all of us can